A classic to me is a read that is timeless. I think it's something that explores themes of human nature that is both meaningful and also universally understood. They are both influential and thought-provoking. They're stories that are beautifully crafted, brilliantly articulated, and uniquely expressed. Classics aren't only meant to be read, but I think they're meant to be absorbed and understood. And I think that classics are like the art of the literary world. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is one that I have been working on for a while now because it's all about classics. Classics are really near and dear to my heart. I love reading them. I know that classics a lot of the time can come off as really intimidating or unapproachable. So I kind of hope to shift your perspective a little bit on classics, or if you were wanting to start getting more into classics, I hope this video will be of some help to you. And I have to do a shout out. This video was somewhat inspired by Poppy. We were having just a brief conversation in the comments on one of my videos about me reading Anna Karenina. And I had mentioned to them that I've never taken like a classics literature course or anything in university. However, it did get me to thinking about how I was able to go into Anna Karenina so willingly and eager. So it did take me back to a lot of the literature I was introduced to in my high school years, and a lot of them were classic pieces that I feel like a lot of us were required to read around that age. So I do think a lot of those reads did kind of cultivate me in a way that allowed me to appreciate classics more. So a couple of those books that I did read at a younger age, I will be talking about because they did impact me quite profoundly. And I think if you're just starting out in the genre, they are good starting points. And these books don't feel as daunting to me. I feel like you can enjoy them on a very surface level, but they also allow you to take kind of a further deep dive into them if you want to. I really think that if you want to enjoy and appreciate some of what are considered the greater literary works by authors like Joyce, Hemingway, Dickens, Dostoevsky, you guys know I can't say his name, so him, Tolstoy, Cervantes, all of these great writers that have written these masterpieces, if you really want to dig deep and extract all that you can out of these literary greats, I think slowly introducing yourself to the patterns, ideology, and language presented in these classics is a great way to do this. I'm of the opinion that you really get what you take when it comes to reading a classic. So the practice of exploring themes in a classic by way of discussion and further study and deconstruction really cultivates a different approach that when reading will allow for further understanding and appreciation for what is being said. So with all that said, here are some of the books that I would recommend to you if you are wanting to start getting into classics. So the first book I'm going to recommend is The Hobbit by Tolkien. I've talked about this book a couple times on my channel. This book is so near and dear to my heart. It's one of my top 5 favorite reads. The book is just really cozy, comforting, and it's a really good adventure fantasy read. It's a children's book, so it's easily read. It's just really easy to get lost in this story. So I would highly recommend this one if you haven't read it. The next one I'd recommend is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This book is set in 1920s New York, which was the jazz age, and our protagonist, Jay Gatsby, is a very mysterious high society millionaire who throws these extravagant parties, but nobody really knows why. This book is great. It's such a fun time. I mean, this was in the roaring 20s, so think, flappers. This was the time of automobiles and cinema and just mass consumerism and really just exorbitance. It's mysterious. There's a bit of romance in here, so I think there's something for everyone to enjoy, and I think this is a great starting point as far as classics go. Great read. The next one I'm going to recommend is Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. This book is so near and dear to my heart. This is actually an autobiography of a horse. So this book is narrated by a horse called Black Beauty, and it's basically just the story of his life. I just think this book really allows for a different point of view, a really unique point of view that you're not going to get very often. And it just allows you to kind of consider things from a different lens. This is a beautiful, touching, sad story, but it's really heartfelt. And I don't think anything can quite compare to this story. The next one is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And I don't hear a lot about this one actually, but this one is one that I have loved ever since I was a little girl. I've watched the movie too many times to count. It's just such a precious story. So this book is about young Sarah Crewe, who is sent off to boarding school as her father enlists in World War II. And she is a very privileged little girl, but life certainly changes for her as she navigates her way through this school. It really just is a beautiful story about imagination, family, friendship, and hope. So this one is a fantastic read. I think that anybody can enjoy. The next one is actually another book by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is The Secret Garden. Very similar to A Little Princess. I grew up with this story and it's one of my favorites. It holds a special place in my heart. So this is a really beautiful, magical coming of age story that explores themes of nurture versus nature. It's a book about life and the human spirit, and it really emphasizes the importance of human connection, faith, and change. So in this book, a spoiled Mary Lennox is sent to live with her reclusive uncle. And while she is there, she discovers a secret garden that has been neglected. And as Mary grows and changes and evolves, she also brings the garden back to life. The next one might be a little controversial, but this is what I love about classics. I think classics really give you the chance to become a free thinker by, kind of pitting yourself against the ideas, opinions, and stances that are being presented in the book. So this one is great for that. Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I did have to read this in high school, I believe. Yeah, it would have been in high school as required reading. And I know this book is very polarizing. Some people absolutely abhor it, and some people really love it and resonate with Holden Caulfield, who is the main character in the story. And I am kind of on neutral ground when it comes to this book. It's been a long time, honestly. I don't remember much of what happens, but I do remember Holden Caulfield and just how intense he is as a character. I think this book really opens the door to discussion and maybe opens your mind a little bit to themes that are explored in a lot of classics. I think this book either will resonate with you or incite you to anger. But either way, I do think it is an impactful one. Another one that can be considered controversial as well is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. After a plane crash, a group of young schoolboys are stranded on an island without any adult supervision. The boys end up forming a sort of hierarchy to govern themselves, which ends up devolving into pure chaos. In its depth, this book is a very thought-provoking read. And I also think at surface level, it still is just an interesting story. So I do recommend this one. And again, I think it's a good book to kind of pit your own thoughts against. So Lord of the Flies. Next one I would recommend is Animal Farm by George Orwell. First off, this book is super short. So the copy that I have is 95 pages. So this is fantastic for anybody who doesn't want to commit to a really long book. This story essentially is about a group of talking animals who overtake their owner on the farm that they live on. But this book is certainly well known because it is a political satire, specifically regarding the Russian Revolution and the rise of Joseph Stalin. I think this book really offers the opportunity to learn how to draw parallels between what was said versus what was implied, so explicit versus implicit meaning. I've read a lot of literature with political undertones, however, this book still remains to be the most concise and blatant novel that I have read featuring political philosophy. So just keep that in mind. This one hits hard, and it's still one that comes into my brain very often, actually. Okay, the next book I'm going to recommend can be pretty divisive, but I do recommend it again, just with the intention that this book really allows for thought. So that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Now, I did have to read this while I was in school, but I'm thankful that I did. And I probably would have picked it up irregardless. I know that there are certainly issues about the vulgarity and racial undertones of this book. However, I think this book really forces you to think about the value of companionship and friendship. I also think it's a wonderful introduction to symbolism and is an extremely thought-provoking read. So whether your thoughts on this book are negative or positive, I do think that it will leave its mark and it's extremely impactful. The next book I recommend I don't own, so I'll just throw up a picture, but it is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This book is just a beautiful allegorical coming-of-age story, and it deals with a group of young boys and the rivalry between the two gangs that they are involved in. Again, this book also introduces themes of imagery and symbolism, but it's a really beautiful read. And this book features one of the most beautiful quotes, which is "Stay golden, pony boy," which refers to the poem by Robert Frost, "Nothing Gold Can Stay." And I'm biased because Robert Frost is one of my favorite poets, and he comprised my favorite poem, which is not "Nothing Gold Can Stay," but either way. So I think so highly of this book. I think it was fantastically well done, and I think it's a great starting point, especially if it sounds interesting to you. You know, it's got a unique plot, and I just think you can't go wrong with this one. So highly recommend it. Okay, now the last one I would recommend, I considered not putting this one in because I think it teeters the line as far as introductory classics go, but I decided to include it. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So I decided to include this book because it has an extremely engaging plot, and it is a surprisingly very digestible read, and it's also accessible. I think this book's really great if you kind of want to practice reading in between the lines, and you can explore the themes that are presented of beauty, morality, and societal influence. But if you don't want to do that, if you just want to have a good read, it's honestly a fantastic, gothic, mysterious, suspenseful, and intriguing read. So I do recommend this one. Okay, now I do have one honorable mention, and I think that because this book just has stuck with me throughout the years, it was one that, again, I had to read back in my school days. But this is, I don't actually know if this is considered a classic. To me it is, and it's just because of how well it was written and the themes that it presents. So that is going to be Holes by Louis Sachar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Louis Sachar. You should know by now I'm awful. Holes. So I think this book probably was one of the first ones, even though I didn't recognize it at the time, but this book really opened up my mind to symbolism and imagery. This book does it so beautifully. But again, it's just simply a riveting read on its own, so you don't have to go too deep if you don't want to. But I think this book allows you to really explore certain themes that, again, are really going to hone your skills when it comes to reading more complex classics. So I would include this one. I think this is a fantastic starting point. Okay, so we've gone through the books that I would recommend. Now I do want to pit them against the ones that I would not recommend. So these classics are classics that are pretty popular, and I feel like maybe if you were looking into starting to read classics, these may be some of the ones that you would hear about or might be recommended, but I'm going against the grain here, and I'm going to say no. These are not good books to start off with, and I will try to be quick with these, but I'll also tell you why and my thoughts on some of these. Now, just because I don't recommend these does not mean I don't like them. That's not the case at all. There's actually a few of these that are loved books for me, but still, I would not recommend them if you're just starting out in the genre. The first book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I'm going to say, you guys, honestly, this book disturbs me. It highly disturbs me. And it's just about how it was published. Now, Sylvia Plath had originally approved publishing this book under a pseudonym. I believe it was Victoria something, I forget. exactly, but from what I know, after her death, they went ahead and published this book under her name. And in reading this book, I have also indirectly dealt with mental illness, from people close to me in my life. After reading this book, hearing about how it was published, it just felt extremely opportunistic and really degrading to Sylvia Plath, especially considering the circumstances of her death. So this book is semi-autobiographical, but honestly, this really felt like a cry for help to me. And I think aside from, the triggering themes in this book, I think this book really requires a deep dive and some reflective thought processes. So I don't think this is beginner friendly. I would honestly do your research before picking up this book, and just to make sure that you're okay with the themes that are in it. But yeah, although I think this is a really important work, this book disturbs me greatly. The second book I would not recommend, and I just finished this book actually last month, the month before, I don't know, but I just finished it, and it is 1984 by George Orwell. So, okay, I think this book is just a lot. It's a lot. It presents a multitude of philosophical themes that really require deconstruction to fully appreciate. So it just isn't ideal as a starting point. It kind of feels to me a little bit textbooky, so it may be a bit of a slower, trickier read. So if you aren't required to read this, I wouldn't until you've maybe been introduced to more classics and are ready to tackle this one. This next one is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I might get a lot of flack for saying this, but I was not a fan of this book. I honestly don't understand the hype behind it or why it's so beloved. That's really all I can say about it. I really don't have much else to say. I didn't like it. So I wouldn't recommend it, but you can definitely try it. I know so many people adore this book, so if you want to give it a go, I would. I don't think this book is as accessible as some other classics. I think the language can be a little difficult. It's been a long time since I've read this, but yeah, it did not impact me in a profound way, so I wouldn't recommend this one. This next one is also possibly a very biased opinion, but it's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I cannot get through this book. I've tried twice or 3 times, I've lost count now, to read this, and it just does not work for me. I struggle with the language, like so much so that I can't even focus on the story underneath because the language just throws me off completely. So I don't know what it is. It might just be one of those books that I have to pick up at the right time in my life. So I will keep trying, but so far I just can't get into it. So again, I just don't recommend this because of my own personal struggles with this book. I don't know how accessible it would be for a beginner, but if it works for you, it works for you, and that's fantastic. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend this one. This next book, I love this book. I gave it 5 stars, but I will not recommend it. And that is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I think this is one of the books that it's so good, you do not want to pick this up at the wrong time. I think the unique writing style, poetic prose, combined with some dark and heavy themes, make it a really impactful book, but I also think it requires you to take a deep dive to really appreciate what Margaret Atwood accomplished in this book. This book is so nuanced. I don't think I've ever read something that impacted me more so with what wasn't said versus what was. Like, this book is the poster child for the term, the silence was deafening. That's this book for me. So it really requires you to read between the lines, or just get to a place where you know you're ready to take on this book before you pick it up. So I would not recommend this as a starting point at all. Okay, this next one is confusing even to me because I can't fully articulate why I wouldn't recommend it. And it's funny because this is actually one of my favorite classics. This book I've loved since I was very, very young and read it, and it has stayed with me, but I would not recommend it. So let me try to articulate this. Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. This is one of my favorite classics, and it's not only because it's set in Canada by a Canadian author, because I'm Canadian. So that's not the reason why. It just is so beautifully written, and this book is just so nostalgic to me. You know, it's so descriptive and so beautiful, but why I wouldn't recommend this is because I think it's really for a certain group of people. If the synopsis doesn't intrigue you, stay away from this book. I think it's meant to be appreciated by those who truly appreciate it and find solace in it, compared to a couple of the other classics that I recommended, like A Little Princess or The Secret Garden, which are kind of similar. It's been a while since I've read this, but this book feels a little bit more one-dimensional, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't really know how to say it any better, but I feel like if you're trying to get used to themes presented in classics, I think the other two books are a little bit more broad in scope, and you can do a little bit more study with them. This one, I think it's honestly just meant to be a pleasurable read. It's one of those ones I think you can just take it as it is, and that's good enough. So I would not recommend this unless it sounds intriguing to you. So that's the only reason why it's on this list. Similarly, this book's also on this list for the same reason. I think this book, along with Anne of Green Gables, is one that you'd see high on classics to read lists, and probably one that's recommended a lot. But same with Anne of Green Gables, I would not recommend it. So it's Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott. Again, I think this book caters to a certain audience, so you really have to see for yourself if it's something that you're going to want to read. But this one can be pretty slow. It also focuses on, you know, it's a coming of age story about 4 teenage girls. So if that doesn't spark your interest, don't read it, because it's literally about these 4 girls as they grow up. So yeah, if you're not going to be able to resonate with any of the characters, you're most likely not going to like this. So although this book is fantastic, I think it's, you know, it's a classic for a reason. I don't necessarily think it's great for everybody. So it's up to you. I would not recommend it as a starting point, just because I don't think it's for everybody. The last book or books that I would not recommend, and I have quite a few, but I'm just going to name the author, is anything by Jane Austen. I do not think Jane Austen is a good starting point when getting into classics. And I think it's just because her books are not accessible. They're periodic reads that reflect the themes, structures, and language of the time that they're set in. Her books have a lot of satirical characters and hidden innuendos that I think would just be missed or unappreciated if you're not familiar with classics. She writes her characters so well, they have so much depth, that you really have to be in the mindset to kind of explore them and the themes that she presents in her books. I don't think Jane Austen is for everybody. I think you have to decide for yourself by reading one or even more of her works, but I would not say she is a good starting point. I know there are some people who she was their introduction to classics and loved her, so that's totally up to you. I just think to appreciate her fully, I would be more comfortable having more experience with classics before tackling Jane Austen. So that is it, you guys. These are the classics that I do recommend versus what I don't. And, you know, just to kind of wrap up, I am of the opinion that classics aren't only meant to be read, but I think they're meant to be absorbed and understood. I think that classics are like the art pieces of the literary world, and they can be interpreted in a multitude of ways, and some you're drawn to and some you're not. In many ways, they are the personal expressions of the author's feelings and thoughts and view of the world around them. So I think whether you agree with their sentiments presented in their books or not, I think that the beauty of classics is it offers us a chance to kind of debate our own viewpoints and understanding, but I also think classics allow our perspective to be stretched and shift and change and evolve. And I really don't think that's possible without considering the perspective of others. So that is really the beauty that I find in classics. But also classics are fantastic to revisit. I think that you can get something different out of them at different points in your life as you change, as your thoughts change. I don't pick them up very often. I'm very particular when and what I read when it comes to classics, because I know that it's an undertaking. For me, it's personally an undertaking. I want to make sure that I'm getting everything that I can out of that classic. Classics challenge me in a way that I like to be challenged as a reader. So I hope this video was helpful to you, you guys. Even if you do pick up some of the ones that I recommended and you don't like them, I still hope they impacted you in a way that you can appreciate. Let me know what you guys have read as far as classics go, what your favorites are, what you don't like, or if you wholly disagree with some of the ones I recommend, please let me know below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Like I said, this video was sparked by just engaging with one of you guys. So I really, really enjoy that. It's part of the reason that I started this channel. So let me know in the comments below. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. And if you got something from this video and you so desire, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.